Hi, so welcome to, I think, number 8 of our Talking Heads series for the Land Use for Net Zero People and Nature's Hub. And Pete Smith and I here head up the topic advisory group on soil health and carbon dynamics. And we've spoken to many experts up to this point on different aspects of soil health, but today we have huge pleasure in welcoming Bridget Elworthy and Henrietta Courtauld, who are the land gardeners. And not only are they the land gardeners, but they are the co-curators of the exhibition Soil, which has been opened now for a while to huge acclaim at Somerset House in London. So welcome, Bridget and Henrietta. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. And I'm going to kick off with the first question, which is, what are the land gardeners?
Oh, okay. So, Ellie, thank you for having us on the show. We are basically we joined together really probably how many years ago, Henry? About 14 years ago, with a huge passion about soil and how we were going to find ways to heal it. That was the initial idea when we got together and when we called ourselves the land gardeners. And then we tried to think about how we were going to start doing that. And we decided to do it very much from the bottom up. So Henry can tell you
Yes,
what.
we decided to get our hands in the soil because that really is the only way you really learn about it. And we started growing organic cut flowers in Oxfordshire and sending them up to London in buckets. And we grew the unusual and all those things that you couldn't. It was so difficult to find in England, that are normally shipped in and I'm afraid sprayed to within an inch of their life. And it's hard work growing cut flowers. It's actually not all about lovely blooms, but we did research as a result a lot about the soil, how to grow in it, and that involved not only gardening with it, but also going abroad to research. We researched a lot with scientists in Austria, and then even beyond, looking at methods of composting in particular. That was what became our obsession.
And so all the time it was quite interesting because we were sort of luring in people with our flowers. I mean, people were just so fascinated by the flowers, but actually, as soon as we got their attention, all we wanted to talk about was soil and soil health. And we tried all sorts of things. There was different parts of the horticultural unit that had really bad soil. There'd been, an area which had just lots of glass houses on it. And for us, it was a real challenge to see how could we turn that soil around. We also did Elbrick soil tests right at the beginning, and then when we eventually sold the business in 2021, we did tests again, and the results were so extraordinary that there were various people that sort of came to us and said, "Well, how did you do that? That's supposed to take 100 years, and how did you get those soils humming? And how come your soil's so fertile?" And
Yes, our soil organic matter levels went up from 5% to between 12 and 15. I mean, and 5 already is already pretty high, but between 12 and 15 is very rare. We spoke to James Rebanks. We saw him at the weekend. He's obviously a great farmer up in Cumbria, and he has very high. I think his levels are up at 12%, but that is exceptionally rare in this country. So, yeah, as Bridgie said, it was at that point that Ben Raskin from the Soil Association said, "You need to be starting to try and do this on farms."
and so we sort of jumped the garden wall and actually having done some trials around in different climates around the world using the same techniques and finding, that they were working even with different inputs, but it was the same sort of way of putting carbon and nitrogen together and the particular method we were doing, making sort of humified compost. So we thought, golly, how do we do this at scale? And that really has been the challenge for the last 4 years as we've been trialing these methods at scale. We've been looking at different ways of how to get the compost and the compost extracts into the soil, and failing miserably on some ends and getting incredible results on other ends. So it's and within that time we decided that we wrote a book actually called Soil to Table, which is a very sort of fluffy book, sort of introducing people to soil, along with lots of other things, recipes to heal your soil and recipes for food, and trying to connect people from, how soil is so integral to us and to our health and to our food systems and ultimately to the planet. And we got quite a lot of success for that. People really loved it, loved sort of looking at soil from a different way. And, we made the book quite beautiful, I suppose. We used lots of big pictures. But as some people said, it was a coffee table book, which we were slightly sort of mortified by. But anyway, it has done what even more than we really imagined. It's got people's imagination going. And then we thought, how can we do this again and make it even bigger? And that's when, Henry, we decided to do the exhibition.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Ellie.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's really inspiring. You took me on to my next question, really, which was what was the rationale for, what was the inspiration, if you like, for the exhibition? So that was a piece of history that I definitely didn't know about. And I guess the second part of the question that I was going to ask is, what was the rationale for how you curated it?
Well, I mean, Somerset House were first of all so incredibly brave to let us do it. We went to them a couple of years ago saying that we thought soil could be a wonderful idea for an exhibition. Bridget and I did research into artworks and did a presentation to them. They then put on their own researcher. And so we had ourselves, the head curator, and another, so that was Claire Catterall, and another brilliant art curator, May Rosenthal Sloan. So there were the four of us who joined together as a team. And it was just the most wonderful journey researching these artworks and actually coming from different, in many ways, coming from different aspects, from different, we all wanted to highlight different things about soil, but I think Bridget and I were most sort of keen really to show the wonder of soil. That was our rationale. So we wanted to show. Yeah.
And I think for us, we were very, I mean, we obviously didn't know too much about art and the art side of it. Thank God May and Claire came to our rescue with that. But what we were very clear on is that we wanted to show soil in a way that was, we even said to them, we want it to be really, we wanted to raise soil to the couture levels. And actually, at one point, there was even a couture house that was looking at sponsoring it. So that even fed our fantasy a little bit more. But to raise soil to the point that, you really need to revere it, and it's not just this brown stuff that you have to wash off your fingers. It's this incredibly sophisticated process and life underneath our feet. Now, we wanted to make sure people knew about the life under the feet, but we also were very clear right at the beginning, curatorially, that we just didn't want it to be about soil. We also wanted it to be about everything that's connected to soil. So, of course, that becomes mind-bogglingly big because, of course, if you think there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of life under the soil, there's the equal amount above it, and how all those links are made. And then we're also very keen to sort of link in how energetically the universe and the cosmos is connected, whether it's through the moon, stars, and different energetic pulls that happen. That of course was a little bit too far out for most. So we had to tone it down. We wanted to have a third underground, a third overground, and a third looking up above us. But I think it's probably more like half underground and above, half above, and a tiny slither of the more energetic or quantum type, agricultural type questions. But at least we raise them a little bit in some of the films.
And of course, so many people suffer from climate anxiety. There's so much worry about our environment. And we wanted everyone to leave feeling positive. We wanted them to leave with this feeling of hope and to really understand how soil really is a solution. I mean, I think that's something that that really hasn't really been captured before. And of course, here we are talking in the news about these billions of pounds that are going into technical solutions for capturing carbon, but actually the soil is our solution. I mean, every single day, as we know, all those plants out there are pumping carbon down into our soils. And if we can get the carbon that's too much of it, that's up in our atmosphere, back down into our soils, soil really does provide us with a solution for net zero, for carbon capture. And so we wanted people to go out with this feeling of hope and thinking, gosh, actually, we can feel good about the future and about our future on this planet.
Excellent, thank you. I mean, you're preaching the converted to Ellie and I.
know.
But what did you hope for the visitors to take away from the exhibition after visiting? If they knew nothing about soil, what were the 2 or 3 key things that you wanted them to feel or to know when they left?
I think the main thing was to for them to realize that there was life. There was so much life in the soil, and that actually it's not just a brown inert substance. And I think for all of us, we're quite compassionate about creatures that are alive, and a lot of people love their pets, and when you suddenly tell them that, even if you've got a pot of soil, you've got a lot of pets to look after. There's a lot of little creatures in there that are depending on you to be kind and to nurture them. And I think that was probably the main thing, that we'd love people and start to make people thinking how sort of what a wonder it is, that soil is a complete wonder, and it's up to us to really look after it. The other thing was probably that, if you can't look after the soil yourself, then you need to support people that do, whether it's buying from somebody who looks after the soil properly, connecting with people that, are growing your food, and even if it's choosing what sort of fiber you're going to wear. So try and think about, not necessarily buying clothes that have plastics in it, because actually they're going to end up in the ground, they're going to end up in us. And so buy things like, hemp and linen and wool. So there's all sorts of messages of how to empower people to actually make a difference. And if we, because we can all make a difference.
And of course, art does capture people's hearts and their feelings. And so it is a very different way. We've written books, we've done talks, but actually this is a different way, really, just to really capture people's heart about this incredible. I mean, soil is the single most biodiverse habitat on this planet. And I mean, we just get so excited about it. Bridget and I are just obsessed. So we really wanted to capture people's hearts and feelings about soil.
I mean, the other part of the soil exhibition, which I think is, has surprised some people, especially people that already know about this. It's like Ellie and Pete, you must have gone. You knew all of those things about the life and about. But there's then the other aspects of, soil is often fought over, so there's wars are over the soil. Soil has a cultural depth, and heritage for a lot of people, or for most of us, really. And we wanted to sort of look at those other aspects that maybe people hadn't thought of before, and how, we all come from the soil and we're all going back there. So it really is very, whether we like it or not, we're super connected to it.
It's fascinating. We had another question for you, which, you know so much already, but wondering whether in the process of curating and gathering the artists you were going to showcase, did you learn anything about soil that really surprised you? Anything new?
Now that's an interesting one. I think we started to look at other angles to it.
I definitely think when we looked at the geological part of soil, and this is not such a hopeful thing, actually, I'm going to tell you all now, but that really plastic has become part of our geology of soil, and that I thought was pretty upsetting.
There's a very powerful piece by Maeve Brennan. Sorry, there's a very powerful piece by Maeve Brennan, and it's in Burkina Faso, and it shows these fields of plastic, where the rivers have overflowed, the dams overflowed, and you've got this plastic all over these fields. And these poor horses are struggling to find grass. And in fact, there's even a shot of one dying. And it is a really powerful way of showing actually what are we doing to our soil by introducing these plastics. And as Bridgie said, she's also looked geologically, and the plastic has been found down a Roman level of soils. So, that's terrifying thought that that's coming into our geology, permanently coming into the geology of our soils.
And then, of course, there was, there was quite a few different things from a cultural point of view. There's a Colombian tribe that basically do spiritual payments. So there are cultural heritage out there where people actually really are revering the soil. They're not just extracting from it, and they are doing a lot of rituals around at different times of the year where they get together and they gather various things. In this case, they were going down to the shores and gathering shells and various things to come back to put into the soil to thank the soil. And on some level, it could be seen as some form of mineral inputs, but it's also a lot about their spiritual gratitude, actually, to Mother Earth.
There's also a wonderful piece by Claire Richardson where you see these children all covered in mud, and it's at a Steiner community in the States. And of course, what that's reflecting, and we've done quite a lot of research on, in fact, Sue Stuart-Smith's written that wonderful book about gardening and the effect on our sort of mental well-being. And there is now, it's been found that there is a bacteria in soil which mimics one which is similar to one in our gut, which stimulates serotonin in our brain. So that whole thing of how you feel good when you go to actually garden and get your hands in the soil, there is actually a scientific reason why you feel good. It is making us feel happy, and of course that's something that we want to really encourage, particularly amongst children, is really getting their hands back in the soil and away from social media.
That leads me on to my next question, which was about what were the reactions that you got? You mentioned children there. Did you get school visits?
Oh, we did. I mean, it was really brilliant. There's someone called Georgie Webber, who is the most incredible teacher in London. And when we rang her up to say, oh, we'd really love to get children involved, but it's quite hard to go directly to schools because actually the Somerset House doesn't have a schools program. And she said, don't worry, I'm involved in quite a lot of schools around the country. I'm going to get them all to write poems and illustrate them. And oh, the poems we got were just wonderful. And a wonderful poet, Laura Muka, put all the poems together and wrote a poem on soil by the children, which was wonderful. And there's a link to actually a lot of their poems and their pictures too.
Oh, amazing. So was it actually part of the exhibition or related to it somehow? Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. So not only was it for the children, it was partly by the children.
Yep. And then she proceeded to bring lots of children into the gallery. So it was just such a joy. And, she said that even some of the teachers were getting quite emotional because they were actually seeing a lot of the things that they'd talked to the children about, and they could see things that we'd done to sort of make this life under the soil come alive. There's a particular installation by Wim van Egmond where he's done these time-lapse films of life under the soil. And at one point, you go through these netted curtains and you're actually inside a core of earth and you can feel the life buzzing around you and you can see, all these creatures at work. And then it goes down even onto a much smaller level. So you can see the bacteria and the protozoa, and you can then see the fungi all working. And I think, that's really hard sometimes to explain to children. But when you could see it, their faces were just, enthralled.
And actually, Georgie's working very hard to try to get soil into the national curriculum. So we are trying to support her in that mission because obviously we feel so strongly that that would be such a good idea.
We actually did quite a fulsome response recently on that to the national curriculum consultation, so we should probably compare notes there. And I mean, that brings me to the next question, which is around legacy, which, you know, very much connected, I guess, to children and education, but to everybody's education, I suppose. What do you see as the, you know, the main legacy of the exhibition for you, and how can people like us help to perpetuate that or upscale it or multiply, I guess, or, you know, contribute to it?
Oh, well, that's very sweet. Well, you know, that was another thing that we thought of when we, you know, when we started this whole thing. We said, you know, of course we're not wanting to do this for, you know, to raise awareness, but we don't really want it to all stop there. So there's several things that are happening. We're hoping we've got quite a lot of interest from around the world for the show, not necessarily the artwork, but the core, anything that can fit in your pocket, basically, any of the audio visual could travel. And then when it reaches another, you know, country, then we draw on artists from that country to tell possibly even another story of soil, and then gathering up all that information as you go around the world is a sort of dream. But equally within this country, our dream would be to have parts of the exhibition and possibly parts working with somebody like George Webber and even yourselves to put together a package for schools so that they could have visually, you know, 1 or 2 hours of relevant, exciting, interesting information and things that they could do. So things like Georgie's got them growing wheat, and they're getting wheat from wild farmed, they're growing wheat in their schools, they're milling, they're crushing the wheat, they're making bread. You know, they're really seeing about how, you know, good soils affect good growth, you know, good food, and that's how you eat it, and really connecting children that way. So for us, that would be brilliant, and we'd absolutely love to team up with you guys to think of ways to get that story out in this country.
And also to support policy change with farmers in particular. Really, they do need our support to make those environmental changes that do present such financial risks, whether that's from the public sector, which is what we would hope. Obviously, that's been a bit of a hitch in that recently, but also the private sector. But we do need that policy change because we do need to support them, and we do also need people who are buying from farmers to realise the importance of you know, what prices they're paying for their produce, supporting them in that way. And then also with consumers, they need to have information about what they're buying. It's often so difficult to make the right decision as to what food to buy and how it's been grown, how it's been reared. So there are policy levels, there are policy decisions, aren't there, throughout. So really, if we hope it will springboard to actually really producing some really solid, powerful changes on that front.
Right.
And on that front, we really do need, you know, Henry and I really see ourselves as probably highlighting and inspiring and working with people to create the awareness. But we would absolutely love to, you know, team up with people like yourselves who know a lot more about how to make these changes, both in government and through research, you know, how to put some structure around it to actually make changes that way.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, the door's open, as you say. This is just the beginning of our engagement. So I was going to ask you, I mean, who needs to see it next? I mean, but I think you've already partly answered that, like everyone, right? Because
Well,
but are there any more specific groups as farmers, consumers?
But I think I think probably not as many people have seen it because, well, there has been a lot of people, and we have to say we've been unbelievably surprised and amazed at how full it's been. So it makes you realize that there is a real interest in soil out there. But obviously, for a lot of people, getting into London is really tricky. So, you know, if there was a way that the show could travel, even not, you know, with some of the expensive artworks, if the message of the show could travel, and maybe we could even pick up other artists locally around England, that would be incredible. And even the King, when he visited last week, he was really interested in discussing the ideas of how we could bring this more out into the countryside, so that farmers and people from the north can get access to it.
That's really interesting. That's very much brings me on to the next question we wanted to ask. But just to reflect on what you said just now as well, we constantly talk about this kind of interplay between you need the science, you need the policy, you need the application on the ground, but you really need to bring hearts and minds along too. And none of these things can exist without the other three.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
We're such believers in what we call beauty and science, that you need that's what we did with our flowers. People came in because they loved the flowers. People come in because they love the art. And then once you capture them, then you sock them with the strong message. and that's when that's when we need people like you really to build the science behind it, so that we can show them that.
And once the science is built and we start to see change, then hopefully government will, start to draft policies so that, in a way, I mean, if you think about the amazing job, in a way, that was done in this country to protect houses and history and heritage, we really do need something similar to protect soils. Because it's so precious and so incredible that, every time I see, we're also garden designers. Sorry, that was the other thing. We do lots of garden designing to help pay for all this soil, our soil passion. But, if one more client asks to have a swimming pool and a tennis court put into a walled garden, I think I'll scream, because, really that should be, that should be listed, because you think of the soil in those walled gardens are just incredible. And they certainly doesn't want a whole lot of concrete poured onto them. I think in a way that's, maybe the next step is to look at how we can protect soils.
And from a governmental point of view, of course, there are so many hidden costs with our the food we're eating. It's all very well to say that we need a strategy of low cost food, but there are costs that are being borne by all of us in society. And so trying to get that message across about the nutrient density of what we are eating comes from the soil. And if we're not eating good food, that means we're going to be ending up in our hospitals. And so if we can try to persuade and get that real sort of enlightenment about the real importance of our soils that way, then a little more investment early on in the foundations of our soil would actually help on so many other fronts. Also droughts and flooding, of course. I mean, here, I know we're preaching to the converted, but, just realizing that those chemicals are going into our rivers, they're polluting our rivers and our seas. And if we can clean those up, and if we can get much better structured soil that can hold the water and stop this flooding downstream, it's just going to save so many costs elsewhere. So
Yeah, soil is that great connector between all of these things we want and the things that we don't want, and we'd like to prevent. So yeah, great opportunity.
And I think, as Henry alluded to before, is that, really nature, the soil and plants are really the most sophisticated and most efficient way of healing our planet. So I think, we need to, if that's true, which we know it is, we then have to think of how do we help the soil do what it's so good at.
Going back to the exhibition itself, so you said you had the King in attendance, which is incredible, children, which is more incredible. What other kind of key moments of people that you had in attendance really blew you away?
Well, I suppose it was really lovely having someone like Helen Browning from the Soil Association, who for so many years has just been the most incredible supporter of soil and people, and trying to bring people together on this big journey. So, Helen Browning and, Charles Dowding came and him and he was just so excited to think that even that, this thing that he'd been so passionate about for so long, there was actually an exhibition about it. It was just so brilliant. And Sheila Dias, who has worked for the, RHS and now is working for the National Trust, or is it the Landmark Trust, Henrietta?
No, it is, I think, the National Trust.
The National Trust. I mean, they were just like a couple of kids in a candy store at looking at all the things, this and seeing that was just, I mean, really wonderful.
And I have to say that first day when Bridget and I walked across the courtyard at Somerset House, because it is the most beautiful, beautiful place in London. And we walked across the courtyard and we saw soil above the door, and then flying high up in the air, there's this beautiful flag saying SOS, Save Our Soils. And we did think, yes, we brought soil to our city, and that was a really good feeling.
And actually, before the king, I mean, the day the king came, there was about 50 farmers that came in to be part of it. And Etta and I arrived at Somerset House, and going through the arches before us was a whole lot of mostly men actually in sort of tweed jackets. And we were like, oh God, those are farmers. Like farmers are coming to see the show. It was so exciting.
Amazing. Was there anything you talked about putting all sorts of things in there, the above ground, the below ground. Was there anything that you wanted to include in the exhibition that you felt that you couldn't in the end because of space constraints or anything else?
I think the next exhibition will be about soil and energy. That's something that's really interested us. There wasn't, as Bridgie said, enough room to put it in this exhibition. But there is a really interesting story to tell there, particularly about water. So I think that will definitely be part of our next exhibition.
You talked a little bit about sort of next steps and what you'd like to do, next steps for this exhibition. Is there anything else sort of specific that you think might happen in the next year or so with this?
Well, the thing that will definitely keep going, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, Ellie, when you were there, is that there's this world map of hope that's at the end of the exhibition. There's a big world on the wall that's sort of rotating with lots of little orange dots on it. And we started, I think, with 120 names. I think we're up to about 170 or something of different people doing amazing things around the world, whether it's they're farms or growers or composters or activists or winemakers, but this is just brilliant stuff. And they're and we want to keep that going. So even during the exhibition, we're adding names, we're taking videos. We took some yesterday when we were at the Oxford Literary Festival. There were a couple of characters there that we wanted to get on the map. And this is something that then there's been quite a lot of interest from people. Like the World Soils Forum are quite keen to have it down in Arles in France at the end of the year. We're hoping it might go to Groundswell. And also it's going to become, you're going to be able to access it on our website. So actually, instead of doing Instagram at night, you could be flicking through, looking at all these amazing people that are really, really trying to find solutions to heal and feed our soils.
And I think through that, we also want to connect those people. We met a wonderful man in Canada, a wonderful farmer in Canada called Owen Galtz, who's doing really interesting things on his farm. He's created closed circuit. So he's just feeding his soil with what he has on his farm, including wood vinegar, biochar. He's doing so much with the community. And he came over to see the exhibition and to see himself in the World Map of Hope. And that was a really good moment. And at the same time, we've got wonderful people from Australia, amazing woman called Rhonda Daly, amazing man, Steve Erickson, Kate Baxter in New Zealand, all these brilliant people. And actually, by having them together on the site, hopefully we can also create a community that will be stronger, I mean, globally, really, at sort of singing the song of soil.
Great. So, I mean, you clearly want to drive change. through this, because actually the art came out of your passion rather than the other way around. So, but it's more than just raising awareness. I think it's important to raise awareness. But what would change look like? What change would you like to see if you could redesign the world? What would it look like?
Well, got it. Well, one change I would love to see, we would both love to see actually, is that people started looking at ways to farm or to grow vegetables without the use of chemicals, because in a way that seems to be the one thing that really sort of mucks with this incredibly sophisticated system that nature has, with growing plants, roots in the soil, and you start putting artificial fertilizers in there, you get less resilient plants. Then they're open to pests and diseases. You start then needing fungicides and pesticides. And we would just love to empower people to be able to, think about their soils and feed them in ways that are going to grow, healthy, resilient plants to feed, people properly, and to heal the soil and the planet. Quite a big aim. We did get taken out to lunch by a very large chemical company, which we felt we could hardly even digest our food. We were feeling like sort of we were traitors. But it was interesting. I mean, it's interesting to talk to them about what they're doing. And, they are looking at biological ways of, feeding soils instead of chemicals. But I mean, that would be incredible if maybe if governments even banned it. There's definitely chemicals out there that should be banned, that we shouldn't be having in our system. So,
and for farmers to be supported and feel that they can financially take that risk to come off chemicals, and where possible to use what they have on their farms to feed their soils, so that they feel empowered and enabled to do that.
So maybe by underwriting the risk, if you're going to get lowered yields, lower returns for maybe 5 years, have that risk underwritten in some way, maybe.
Well,
exactly.
wouldn't that be brilliant? Brilliant. Exactly.
Yep, that sounds like a very, very wise thing to do, Pete. But anyway, I mean, what's super exciting for us is to sort of connect again, and to you, Ellie, because I know we talked a few years ago, and but just to see what work you're doing, and how you're how you're interacting with the soil, and I would just so love to work together.
I mean, brilliant. I mean, that's from the LUNZ Hub perspective, as well as from the Sustainable Soils Alliance perspective. We'd really love to learn some of the lessons that you've learned through this process. What lessons would you sort of impart to us about how we can communicate better about soil? Because we tend to communicate with very specialist audiences, whereas what you've achieved is communicating with everybody, which is includes the specialists.
Well, and I think something else that's really important to us is collaborating. I mean, there are so many people out there doing brilliant things. The Soil Association, the Sustainable Food Trust, Pasture for Life, the Organic Research Centre, at Sustain, you're doing brilliant things. And we just feel that more that we can come together to collaborate, the more powerful we will be. So we are totally up for supporting and helping in any way we can.
Brilliant. Well, there definitely will be many more conversations after this one.
Thank you.
This has been really fabulous, really, really refreshing for us, I think, Pete, to have that sort of zooming out and, seeing the beauty of soil and all the different ways that people can relate to it at that much more sort of visceral and visual level. And of course, if you don't win hearts and minds, you can't really do the rest, because nobody will care whether you do it or not. So this is really, really important work. Thank you so much for talking to us.
All power to your elbow.
Oh, well, thank you both so much. And thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yeah, here.
Thanks.